So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Annelie Börjesson, and I am President of the United Nations Association of Sweden. And it's my very great pleasure to welcome you here today to this conference that will endure for 2 days. It's quite historic, actually, also, since we arranged one 50 years ago. That was almost to the day when UNA Sweden hosted a civil society forum in connection with the first United Nations Conference on the Human Environment in 1972. We are proud to be able to once again, prior to the UN high-level meeting Stockholm +50 later this week, bring together the Swedish and international United Nations movement, other civil society organizations, representatives of the academic and political sectors, and other guests. I would like to bid a special welcome to our international guest from the United Nations associations of Armenia, Denmark, Finland, Georgia, Tanzania, and Uganda, who are also here. Also, a very warm welcome to those of you who follow us online. I would say that indeed we have 2 interesting days ahead of us, and I will guide you through the program. During the 2 days here at the House of Culture in Stockholm, we aim to inspire with visionary ideas and good examples of work in progress to solve some of the greatest challenges of our time. We will emphasize the role of civil society to hold our governments and other stakeholders accountable and work with them to increase efforts to address environmental issues that have resulted from human activity. The war in Ukraine and the pandemic both emphasize the need to implement new initiatives for the environment and strengthen efforts that are necessary to fulfill the global goals and the 2030 agenda. Starting Thursday, the Stockholm +50 meeting commemorates the 1972 United Nations Conference on Environment, and it also celebrates 50 years of global environmental action. As you may know, the Stockholm Conference was the first UN conference to use the word environment. It provided a set of principles to guide international cooperation on the environment. It also led to the establishment of the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, and it was also the first UN event that supported the participation of civil society. Our 2-day conference will focus on positive examples and initiatives on how to move forward. On this first day, we will hear about local partnerships for democracy and climate action, and we will also get a youth perspective. Tomorrow, on the 1st of June, we will get more positive examples from the International United Nations Associations movement, and we will also get both UN and expert perspectives on the environment, the economy, the climate, and sustainability. But most of all, I would say that this is your conference. I encourage you to take the opportunity to use these 2 days in Stockholm to listen and to learn and to also be inspired from the discussions and the lectures and also the informal meetings with other participants, for example, afterwards and during the coffee breaks and so on. And now I'm very honored and happy to present to you the first speaker. He was one of the hosts of the first conference in 1972, and he has spent his entire life working for the ideas and the spirit and the values of the United Nations. He has served as Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations and also head of the UN's European headquarters in Geneva. He is also a well-known writer of criminal novels. He will talk about the background of the Stockholm Conference in 1972 and the result of the conference and why civil society and the non-governmental organizations are so important. So please welcome Ambassador Jan Mårtensson. Big applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, UN friends, there's a Chinese proverb that says that you shouldn't stand up if you can sit, and you shouldn't sit if you could lay down. But I think I will go middle way and sit down. Oh, I'm almost 100 years soon. Said I was the Secretary General of the National Committee of the Stockholm Conference in 1972, and I have a paper to support what I'm trying to remember. I feel like a ghost from a past century now. As you know, the UN was invited by the Swedish government by the end of the 60s to hold the first ever environmental conference in Stockholm, 1972. And the Minister of Agriculture, responsible in the government for the Swedish side of the conference, my friend Ingemar Bengtsson, he later became the president of the conference. He asked me to assist him. And he said, literally, I don't care what you do or what it costs, but it has to be damn good. It has to be damn good. That was the only formal instructions I ever got. So I had rather free hands, which was nice. Of course, in close cooperation with a lot of institutions and the government, etc. And the first day in office, I reserved 5,000 hotel rooms, and I asked our world-famous opera singer Birgit Nilsson to sing at the opening of the conference in the Royal Opera House, because I felt it should have a worthy sort of coulisses when we started such an important voyage. And we have to remember that the environment as such didn't exist in the public consciousness. Water and air were considered by economists as free rights that could be used by whomever in whatever way. And the creator of DDT received a Nobel Prize in chemistry. So, I mean, that was our standing point. Lone voices like Rachel Carson in her book Silent Spring was heard, and together with some others like Hans Palmstierna, the Swedish scientists, they issued warnings, but smoke from high industrial chimneys and foam on waterways were considered signs of development and prosperity. So it's an interesting example of how a relatively small country can push important issues to historical decisions. From an almost anonymous existence, our environment is now one of the UN most important priorities, high up on the agenda, as we all know. And intensive international preparatory work began. 133 of the then UN member states participated, and 250 non-governmental organizations attended as observers, and a lot of journalists, of course, so it was a huge undertaking. And in the beginning, some political problems emerged. Developing countries were suspicious. They believed that the developed countries wanted to slow down their development and competitiveness through various bans and restrictions. After all, it was the developed countries, they felt, that were responsible for the majority of the pollution. On the other hand, developed countries feared that the new artificial environmental regulations could affect their industry and national integrity. And the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc would not participate. They threatened with not participation. If not, East Germany wasn't included amongst the invited. And the problem was that East Germany, Democratic Republic of Germany, was not a member of the United Nations. And this was a way to go find a back way into membership of the United Nations. So it was not any, they didn't have anything against a better environment, but it was a political thing. But we didn't know until the very last end ifs the East Bloc, quite a few countries, would come or not to the conference. So we have to plan for 2 conferences. One if Russia and the Bloc participated, and one if they didn't. I mean, it didn't make our life easier, if I say so. Well, but these things were sort of smoothed out by under the dynamic leadership of Maurice Strong, who was, as you know, the Secretary General on this United Nations side for the conference, and later on head of UNEP, amongst other things. Well, it was the largest international conference we ever had in Stockholm. It was a great demand on logistics and technology. Mobile telephone, for instance, didn't exist. You could imagine thousands of people that couldn't connect with each other like they can today. And telecommunications had to be expanded. And the premises were insufficient. So I have to be pragmatic, and I cleaned out the 2 chambers of Swedish Parliament. We emptied them and built new conference facilities. But we put the old inventories back, so you can't see the difference now. And every delegation, particularly the non-developed countries or developing countries, they didn't have permanent representation in Stockholm, so we saw to it that every delegation got office space and transport facilities. And we constructed an air bridge from Kastrup to Arlanda because there was a heavy demand on the air connections. And in addition, I required several hundred white bicycles from Monarch, and they were distributed all over the city so that anyone could cycle around, because we wanted to show that this is really an environmental conference, not with a lot of cars. And excursions were arranged to different places in Sweden to show local solutions to international environmental problems. And I recruited a very competent, a very hard-working staff to assist me in this gigantic jigsaw puzzle, as it were. And we had a sort of a ruling, an approach. We call it Operation Mr. Smith. We followed a delegate who didn't exist, but from Perth in Australia, traveling, being a member of the delegation from Australia, traveling to Stockholm, Arlanda, and spending 2 weeks here, and tried to find out any sort of difficulties or problems or things that could happen for him, which we printed in little leaflets. And then when he left, then we multiplied that operation with 5,000, and it worked very well. Nothing happened. Everything was solved already before it happened. And I've always been involved in the NGO community, and I understand the importance of the NGOs because they exist all over the world, and they have access to crimes against human rights or whatever, and they could bring that to the forum of the United Nations. So I arranged a parallel forum for the NGOs where delegates participated as speakers. And there was an exchange of ideas and very constructive, and a network of contacts between delegations and non-governmental organizations. And that has since become a procedure for future United Nations conferences. And during my UN time, I was in charge of disarmament and then of human rights during the Cold War. I pushed the issue of NGO participation. Not every country liked that, because I said UN is a forum for states, not for funny non-governmental organizations. But anyway, it worked very well. And we also arranged a less formal forum, a tent city for younger groups with their own activities out in Skarpnäck. It was an old airfield, and where they could play guitar and sing and didn't bother to demonstrate in the city. And security was, of course, important. We got information about planned demonstrations, bomb threats, terrorist groups were active in Europe, and a few months after the conference, Israeli athletes were murdered during the Olympic Games in Munich, as you will remember. But our security had full control, and we always worked with plainclothes security. Not many policemen were at site during the period. And the most important thing, perhaps, was that the conference was not a kind of jumbo-mambo thing with a lot of talk. There were results. An environmental declaration with 26 principles. Perhaps the most important was that states would refrain from activities that could harm other states. 109 recommendations on international action and 5 resolutions. The most important, to my mind, of which was the proposal to the General Assembly to create UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Programme. That was really a very positive outcome of the conference. And other resolutions included the living environment, natural resources and environment, pollution, information, education, and etc. Well, to conclude, it was a successful conference. It was sunny and happy atmosphere with a nice ambience all over the city. The sun was shining, the sky was blue, and the summer wind was mild and complacent. And the conference machinery worked to 100%. I was happy about that, of course. And the main message of the environmental declaration is to protect and safeguard the human environment, and that important access to a healthy environment is a human right. Could you imagine? It's a human right to have a healthy environment, which is written in stone. Well, another important conclusion is that environment is a part of growth and development. The costs involved must thus be moved from the negative to the positive page of the balance sheet. You are moving, am I too...
I'm giving you a little hint that we're approaching.
Well, the conference thus identified the problems and the solutions and indicated the directions toward our future. The starting shot, really, of the global activities was this Swedish initiative. And several international meetings followed, as you know, in Rio de Janeiro and Paris, Glasgow, to mention a few. And recently, a United Nations climate report was published. It summarizes the situation as very serious. But we have the tools needed and the insight of what must be done. What is needed is political will and decisions, fast and comprehensive. The world is at a crossroad. Public opinion is an important factor, and in this respect, the NGO community, such as the UN Association, have an important role to play. And now I will conclude in quoting one of my favorite American authors, Mark Twain. He said that the history of mankind is a deplorable episode on one of the minor planets. A deplorable episode on one of the minor planets. We have to remember that and see to it that it doesn't happen. There is only one Earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this, Jan. I just wanted to take the opportunity to asking you, if you've told us so many interesting things now, and you mentioned both the white bicycles and also the creation of UNEP and the environment as a human right. But if you could choose just one memory that you would say is one of the most vivid ones that you remember, what would that be? Or there are plenty, I suppose. but is there anything that you think specifically of?
Well, my memory isn't what it should have been, but one specific effort. Well, I could say one thing, which came to life when you mentioned the white bicycles, that Morris Strong and I cycled on the white bicycles in front of the Swedish Parliament on the front page of Herald Tribune. So it was a contribution to the awareness of bike rather than ride car.
That's grand. Thank you so much for sharing this memory with us. A big applause again to Mr. Jan Mårtensson.
Okay.
So we have a little gift for you. Here it is. So thank you so much. It's just a symbolic little thing. It's
I
olive
hope
oil.
it's ecological.
I suppose it is. Indeed it is. Yes, of course. There you go. Thank you so much for
Extra
joining us
virgin
here today.
olive oil.
Olive oil.
I was, yes, very nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jan. Thank you for visiting us.
Now I have to go and make some other speeches, if you excuse me.
So we will now move on to the next point, and I will actually invite to the floor two other gentlemen who are members of the United Nations Association of Sweden and who were here in 1972. A warm welcome to Mr. Arne Jernelöv, who is a Swedish professor and former director of the International Institute of Applied System Analysis in Vienna. And he's also a UN expert on environmental catastrophes. Mr. Jernelöv attended the Stockholm Conference in 1972, and he was then a delegate for the World Health Organization. So an applause for Mr. Jernelöv. Please have a seat. I would like to bring up on stage also Mr. Sten Lindeberg. A warm welcome to you. Mr. Lindeberg, he was engaged in various activities related to what was called the People's Forum in 1972. Please come up on stage. And it was arranged by some 20 grassroots organizations and also political organizations. And UNA Sweden actually arranged another event called, it was the Environmental Forum. And we arranged it together with the National Council of Swedish Youth Organizations during the Stockholm Conference. And it actually attracted more than 1,000 people from all over the world during the 2 weeks that it took place. Would you like to have a seat? Yeah, that's great. Please. So, let's see. I have some questions for you, of course. Mr. Jernelöv, I would like to start by asking you, could you tell us what you did in connection to the Stockholm Conference in 1972?
Well, I was an environmental scientist, and in the late 70s, I think it was 67, Sweden first suggested to the UN that a conference would be organized. And then for a while I was engaged as one of the scientists, experts to advise our political negotiators and diplomats in the UN. And then, of course, the UN took the decision in '69. But the whole atmosphere at the start of this was that this is an odd thing. And very frequently, the first year or so in the UN, this was referred to as the Swedish matter, more or less saying that those more or less crazy ones who keep talking about this when we have more important things, really. Anyhow, that changed, and this, I think, was one of the great achievements in the preparation and, of course, during the conference. Then for myself, I was out of things for a while. I got a professorship in US in 1970 and started to work with WHO the year after, and spent a long time in Iraq in connection with the Mercury catastrophe. And just when I came back from that, I was, so to say, told by WHO to come here and represent them. So I came back, so to say, to Stockholm and found myself in one role that was unexpected in a way. Then it happened that I had learned to know Maurice Strong in Canada, also during my time in the US then. But my position here was as a WHO delegate.
All right. Well, good. So, could I move on to you, Mr. Lindeberg? How about your experiences and participation in 1972?
Well, it started very much, as I can see here on the monitor, to bring a people's perspective on board. And not so much looking to the official stakeholders. At that time, environmental groups were growing up everywhere in Sweden, mostly concerned about the local problems, but also concerns about other problems like the acid rain coming from Britain to Sweden and destroying our waters, and some bad things putting in our food so it should taste better. And for my part, I started to plan this with a small group of friends, scientists, in our kitchen, and we knew we have to do something, and we did that in the late 71. And parallel to that, also other people and groups started to think about this. One of the most important groups were the Alternative City grassroots movement, who was very active in Stockholm during time where they were tearing down a lot of the city and created what we have here now. And they also tried to cut down some of the beautiful elms which we have in the King's Garden. And they felt that there was something going on, and they think that there was increasing traffic, pollution, local pollution, and so on. There were also two small but very interesting groups. One was called OY. It was people from here who had met other young people at conferences where they have talked about how the developing countries were not considered when you talk about natural resources destruction, environmental issues. And another group who were focused on the science-based issues in those countries. It calls the powwow. Powwow sounds funny, but it means like the Indians have a powwow. That means that you sit together and discuss problems. And there were also a lot of other groups, many leftist groups, but also the very large anti-USA bombing in Vietnam groups. That was a very big issue in Sweden at the time. And we all came together in February 1971. There were something like 35 different groups. I participate as one who has been starting the Uppsala Environmental Group. And my wife was also there. She was a board member of the newly formed Association of the Environmental Groups in Sweden. And from then on, the planning went on. And of course, with all these different groups, there were a lot of infights, a lot of discussions, but it all came out very well, and it was very well organized. And we were all focused on that. We were totally independent. No money, no influence from the official conference. And we got our locations in the ABF house during these 2 weeks. And that's how I came there. Then I wasn't quite on board on the day just when this happened. One reason was that I was finished my doctoral thesis in atomic physics. I was really sitting, writing by hand. And the other, of course, much more important, which has percussion for today, our first child was born in June 29. So I had some other things to take care of at the time. But I tried to read, to remember and see. And the problem you see here is that so many things were going on at this conference. And there are so many pictures of what actually happened. So you get different stories from different persons.
Indeed, that's so. Thank you so much for this. And as you say, the different stories from different persons, I'd like to ask you both then, if the climate is on the top of the agenda now, and the topic that is most discussed, what would you say were on the top of the agenda in 1972?
Just me?
Yeah, we can start with you. Thank
Well,
you.
one topic was not on the agenda, and that was the climate crisis and the global warming. Although much earlier, the Swedish scientist Svante Arrhenius in 1896 had proposed that the increasing burning of fossil fuel would result in global warming. And another Swedish professor in meteorology, Bert Bolin, he started to investigate what happens with the gases in the atmosphere. And he started in the late 60s. He collected a lot of scientists all over the world. And they very quickly found out that if you go on this road, there will be a catastrophe. He was also the main figure behind what you all know as the IPCC, the International Panel of Climate Crisis. And that was created in 1989, I think. Still not much talk in the general public. Nothing at the conference, as far as I remember. I wrote a book on energy futures in Sweden in 1975. I devoted 7 pages to this issue, this problem. No one ever asked me about that when they read the book. And I wasn't very much concerned because I didn't quite see this dark cloud lurking in the distance somewhere. It was so far away. And now we see what happened. So that was, I think, very interesting. But the general idea of the problems that came up, also formulated here by Jan Mårtensson and by you, they were already present at that time. For instance, the absence of representation from the developing world, that was really a big issue. And we tried in Folkets Forum, People's Forum, and also in Environmental Forum to find these people to come here. They had no means to come here. They hadn't the money, they didn't know how to go about it. And that has been a general problem since then, I think, for many of them. The other thing which was very important was that we realized that this is not about local problems for us in the rich world. It's problems everywhere. We create a lot of them, but they will hit people in the developing world. And by the way, I am so happy to see that there are much more of people from other countries here. As I see, it's not only rich white men, which was a general kind of picture of what those who manage these things at the official conference. And also, thanks to the awful bombings in Vietnam and the defoliation of the trees with Agent Orange, we all understood that there is connection between war and environment. And we see this tragically enough today with Ukraine, where not only the country is destroyed, but also the precautions for the increased use of fossil fuels is a very bad sign. So that's some of these issues that came out, I think.
And what do you think? Do you share the picture here? Is there anything that you would like to point out?
Well, I think if we go back to 72, the things high on the environmental agendas were not those we talk mostly of today. They were basically, in Sweden, mercury was a big problem. Globally, chlorinated hydrocarbons, DDT. We had various types of water pollution, including eutrophication, that was up on the agenda. What the conference really did was to get an acceptance for the idea that discharges in one country could affect other countries. This was to some extent recognized when it came to rivers. Holland or the Netherlands had large problems with the pollution of the Rhine, which was caused mostly upstreams in Germany and some extent in Switzerland. But by and large, up to that point, environmental problems were seen as local and national problems. And what the conference did was to get an acceptance for the idea that the discharges could also harm neighboring countries. The idea of any global pollution at the time did not quite exist, except in the form that certain types of pollution would appear in many places because you had local discharges all over. So to me, this was the most important result, and of course the creation of UNEP became an important part of this message. And later we got the European Convention Against Transnational Air Pollution and similar things. The acid rain, for example, was one of the new things on the conference. But although the acidity of waters and to some extent the dying spruce forests were recognized, it was not at all accepted that the discharges of sulfur from Britain, for example, were a cause. And there had been some mistakes in the early presentation of the acid rain hypothesis at the time, as one had counted the average value of pH, which is a logarithmic unit, so it doesn't, which of course contributed to the fact that the British coal industry had a sort of argument saying the weakness of the science is too big here. But as I said, the real breakthrough in Stockholm, I feel, was this recognition of the international aspects of it. But then, from my position, what I saw many types of inside fightings, what should be on the agenda and what should not. WHO, for example, did not like at all the ban on DDT. One meant there, my colleagues, and what I was sent to say was that the human health aspect, if you ban DDT against malaria and yellow fever, you have an extremely high cost in human lives. And of course, FAO said the same thing.
This is so exciting. And unfortunately, we're running out of time. I suppose that we will try to invite you on a later occasion to discuss this further. So I will have to say thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your experiences from the 1972 conference. And a big applause to the two gentlemen. And we have to you as well some organic olive oil that you will be given as a small gift. Thank you so much. And thank you so much. So, Mr. Jernelöv, there you go. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. And also to you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next session in today's program has the title Voices of Global Youth on Environment and Climate. I would like to welcome up on stage my colleague Ms. Michaela Engvall again, who will moderate this session. So I will step down a bit.
All right, and I will invite up on stage our youth panel. Please welcome Goodluck, Yoko, Tamta, Inessa, and Emma. Big round of applause. Okay, please take a stand here by the tables. Yeah.
Can I get the mic again? I think that I should hold a little speech before you start, if I'm correctly.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
So I will do so. Well, first at COP26, which was held last year in Glasgow, as you might know, Sweden launched a global initiative to strengthen young people's participation during the Stockholm +50 meeting. And a youth task force was then established with representatives from all over the world. And the youth task force has been facilitating global and regional youth consultations with a goal to provide input on the leadership dialogues and also to produce a youth policy paper. And then some weeks ago, UNO Sweden actually arranged a climate conference with Swedish youth. And the main focus then was to discuss climate security, but also to facilitate a local consultation together with our sister UNAs to provide input to the global youth policy paper. And also to shed light on the importance of youth engagement in the context of climate and environmental work. So therefore, we have arranged this panel here today. So these are our sister UNAs, and Michaela will introduce them more thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annelie. Yeah, I will take it from there. Please, good luck here. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so the name of this panel is Voices of the Global Youth on Environment and Climate. And as Annelie just mentioned, the purpose with this panel discussion is to lift and highlight the voices of global youth and the importance of youth engagement in the context of climate and environmental work. And with us today, we have Tamta, who is the program manager of UNA Georgia. We have Yoko, member of the Stockholm +50 Youth Task Force. We have Inessa Pambukhchyan, program officer UNA Armenia. We have Emma Holmström, member of UNA Stockholm Youth, which is a part of the UNA Sweden movement. And we have Goodluck Minja, the SDG and Human Rights Officer of UNA Tanzania. Very welcome here. And I was thinking that we could start with a question from you, for you, Tamta. You work as the program manager of UNA Georgia, and I'm curious to know more about how UNA Georgia work with youth engagement.
Thank you, Michaela. Hello, everybody. It's a great privilege for us to be here and represent our work. So UNA Georgia was established in 1995, and since then, one of our biggest and one of the more important target are young people. Before I directly answer the question that you asked, I will just say briefly who are the young people and what are the background of them we work with. So in Georgia, mostly we work with ethnic Georgian youth, but within the country we have two big ethnic minority groups that we also cooperate. This is ethnic Armenians and ethnic Azerbaijanis, and we try to focus more our programs to the promotion of integration and tolerance. So how we do this? We try to strengthen the local organizations and support the capacity building of civil society organizations across the country. So we cooperate with up to 18 organizations who are doing a really amazing job across the whole country, and with our support there is functioning 14 youth centers in 13 different municipalities. This is those youth centers are based on the basis of our partners, and beyond this, we try to reach out young people who are living in very remote areas of Georgia. Also, we have another group of young people who belong so-called IDP youths. They are internally displaced people after the war with Russia in 1992 and 2008. So we also work with this group of young people. And another group of young people, this is so-called NEETs, so young people who are not involved in education, in trainings, and they do not have jobs, so they are not employed. And they are mostly living in the most remote areas of the Georgia. So what we do is to activate those young people, to motivate them to become more to give them the educational, offer them educational sessions, seminars, trainings. The first part of our strategy, how we work, is to giving them knowledge. Another part is to offer them the space to take an action, so they can organize youth-led trainings, get some fundings for the youth micro-projects, so they can turn their ideas into the actions. Hope that I didn't take too much time.
Thank you very much. It's very impressive to learn more about your work to activate youth and the vast activities that you implement.
Thank you.
And we also have Yoko with us today, who is a member of the Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Task Force. Would you like to share with us what the Youth Task Force do and how the process was forming it?
Yeah. So my name is Yoko. So I am from Canada or in Japan, like both. So for Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Task Force, the progresses started in December, like last year. And it's organized by the nation's major group for children and youth. And there's like 56 youth members on the Stockholm Task Force, and like from all over the world. So we prepared and contact youth consultations like internationally and both regionally and locally. And we also prepared for UNEA, like United Nations Environmental Assembly in Nairobi. And so we developed a policy paper, a handbook as well. So the handbook is really for how the meaningful youth engagement. And the policy paper, there are 3 drafts. Like the first draft was like after the policy, the consultations. So now we already published a 3rd draft. We finished it, and we will bring the 3rd draft to the Stockholm Plus 50 conference, which is in a few days. And so with the policy paper, we had there's 2 different leadership dialogues. So I will present later for the main key points. And so with the youth policy paper, they are it's from different organizations, the policy recommendation papers.
Thank you so much for sharing. And we will get back to you. We will hear your demands, in short, actually. Yes. But before that, we also have you and Armenia here. And Inessa, how do you work with the youth activism on grassroots level?
Yes, I would like to thank first to UNA Sweden for giving us this unique opportunity to represent what we are doing. And let me start off by saying that we strongly believe, on behalf of Armenian UN Association, that we strongly believe in youth representation and leadership. And we strongly believe that our generation is most educated and best connected. So we are the ones that are about to bring change in the world. So that's why work with youngsters is our priority. And how we do it with the grassroots. So we are targeting the remote rural Armenian communities where youngsters have a vision towards their community, but they don't have any opportunities to be engaged in any kind of projects. So we are building their capacity, empowering them to become agents of change, to act independently. And our projects follow the right-based approach and the theory of change. And we have 4 principles of working with youngsters. So it's empowerment, support, cooperation, and follow-up and consistency. First, we empower youngsters to become independent game changers that understand the development context and to have vision towards their communities. After, we provide some capacity building sessions, improve their knowledge and skills, and we create these grounds for cooperation with the stakeholders, with the duty bearers, and we constantly give the feedback and follow up how they are working, so to improve their work. After our interventions, our youngsters are becoming multipliers of the right-based approach to development and leaders in their communities. So their peers learn a lot from them, and the duty bearers are becoming transparent, accountable, and inclusive. Yes, so this is the main approach, and our youngsters in the remote rural communities, we don't have NGOs, operating NGOs, so our youngsters are becoming cornerstones for building civil society in their communities, and they are recognized community-based organization, the youngsters that we have right now, that we worked for 2 years. So yes, I will end up my speech by quoting Kofi Annan, our favorite and inspiring, that yes, you are never too young to lead and too old to learn. Yes.
Very true. Thank you. Thank you very much, Inessa, for sharing the important work you do to capacitate youth to actually be their own leaders of change in their communities. On the topic on youth engagement, my next question is for you, Emma. You are a board member of UNA Stockholm Youth, and I was wondering, how did your engagement start, and why is the environment important to you?
Well, I can say that I am in a very, not a weird circumstance, but I can see that there were two specific things that led me here. I have to mention first that I've always been a person that has wanted to make change. From when I was very young, I've always wanted to work with like making the world a better place. But in 2018, on my school, we had a Model United Nations, and for those who don't know what it is, it's basically a simulation of what it would look like if you were in the United Nations. So when I was there, I was like, this is really cool. I would really want to work with this in the future. And that same year, it happened that I went to the Nobel Prize Museum, and I have autism, so it became kind of my special interest. And also that same year, ICANN was the one that got the Nobel Peace Prize, so I got very interested with questions on nuclear disarmament.
So thank you very much. And yeah, I think I will continue with you, Goodluck. You're also working on youth engagement, and you're the program officer of UNA Tanzania. And you work actively on youth engagement when it comes to the environment. Could you please share some examples about the projects and the engagement that you have with youth on the environment?
Okay, thank you, Michaela, and thanks to everyone who came here. So, UNA Tanzania is a civil society organization established in 1964 with a vision of a just and sustainably society where no one is left behind, and with a mission to mobilize for action, promote inclusiveness and enhance accountability, and to see that no one is left behind in the implementation of sustainable development in Tanzania. So going back to environment aspect, we work with different, a diverse group of youth in and outside school. And in school, we have our youth wing called Youth of United Nations Association. In a short term, it's UNA. And outside school, we are working to make sure that this youth can have a platform where they can share their experience and recommendations towards national development plans. And recently in 2020 and 2021, Tanzania was developing its National 5-Year Development Plan 3, which is a tool for implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. So we collected several environment issues from youth groups to make sure that the integration of the national plan works well. So apart from that, we also work into another aspect, like not from Tanzania mainland. We're working in Tanzania Zanzibar, where we are focusing on communities at large, and youth is our main target group, where we also mobilized over 200 youth to plant mangrove trees for marine ecosystem restoration. And this was done in last year. And also we were successfully established environmental school clubs for youth to have, young people to have an opportunity to discuss their issues, even if it's a school environment, and to make sure that at least things like environmental good practices starts in school and not when people are outside the school. So that was a successful issue that we did. And also we had another aspect of revamping the local government authorities environmental committee, which of course we made sure that composes of youth representatives who actually gives recommendation about environmental issues around the municipalities. So that is what we actually did. Thank you.
It's fantastic. Thank you very much. Very inspiring to hear about your work. The Stockholm Plus 50 Task Force has been facilitating both global and regional consultations with youth, and now it has resulted in a youth policy paper. And Yoko, could you share some of the input from the consultation? And we're also really interesting to hear what are the 3 main demands from the global youth?
Yes. So I'm going to read the key demands of my phone.
Please.
So yes, for the section, reflecting on the urgent need for actions to achieve a healthy planet and prosperity of all, which is Leadership Dialogue 1. The 3 key demands from that section is about ecocide. So they recognize the right to a healthy environment and introduce large-scale environmental destruction, ecocide, as a punishable crime in international law. I'm going to actually speak one for each leadership dialogue.
Sounds like a good idea.
Perfect. So for leadership dialogue 2, achieving a sustainable and inclusive recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the key demands from that is the science-based approach in policy making, while also integrating traditional knowledge in response to our triple planetary and health crisis, recognizing the interconnections. For Leadership Dialogue 3, accelerating the implementation of the environmental dimension of sustainable development in the context of the Decade of Action. And the key demand is to immediately phase out all fossil fuels to achieve net negative emissions by 2050, following the principles of a just transition and common but differentiated responsibilities. And finally, in the 4th section, ensuring inclusive process for decision making. It is participatory and inclusive decision making at every level. Democracy, free speech, press freedom, organization, and free and fair elections, and protect and support young activists, and violence against young human rights, land, and justice defenders. So I'm actually going to also talk about the next steps.
But that was the demand, the main demand.
Yes.
I think they deserve a big round of applause. Actually, really fantastic. What if youth led the world? Maybe it would be a greater world.
Yes. Sure. That was enough.
Thank you. Please continue.
Oh, yeah. So for the next steps.
Yeah, the next steps.
Is that, so basically after this, so that was from the 3rd draft. So basically this will be open to the comments, and so you will be represent at the Stockholm Plus 50. And so the most important thing is really to think beyond Stockholm Plus 50, like Stockholm Plus 51, Stockholm Plus 52. Like it's not just about the conference, but we need to think about the future and really include future generations and really to connect the future generation to next generations so that no one's left behind, especially the environmental problems. That's always be the same. So if you don't focus on it now, you will be having a really negative impact for the future. So it's really important to think about the future and really integrate our children and for the future, basically, yes.
Thank you so much. Very well. And Emma, you were also a part of the consultation process here in Sweden, actually, and the consultation process facilitated by LSU and UNA Sweden. What do you think government should do to protect and preserve the environment?
I think that, first of all, it's a very big question, mainly in...
Sorry for that.
Yeah, but I think I can reference the policy paper that has been made, which takes up a lot of what can be done. But I think the main thing is I think a lot of youth can relate to this, is that politicians say that they will do a lot of things and then they never do, and that we want to know that they will say that they're going to do this and going to make the environment better, and then they will actually do it. And I think it's at least very important now here in Sweden, since it is an election and there will be a lot of promises probably about the environment, but I feel that the promise that they will actually do it, and then we will see some form of like concrete solutions that they will make.
And promises. Let's hope for that. Thank you so much for sharing. And we've heard a bit about the global perspective here. I'm curious to know more about what is the most important for youth in Georgia when it comes to climate actions. Tamta.
Thank you, Michaela. It's a great question. Well, first, as I mentioned in my previous word, that we have many challenges, many problems from the political, social, and economical side, that all these challenges are reflected in the lives of young people. Now, what we really need to do is to raise youth awareness about the climate change and climate adaptation, because we try to move this topic into their agenda. And another one, which is really important, is to create the platform and support actually the platform where young people can have a direct dialogue with the decision makers and also the CSOs who are involved in this process. Because, for example, here, what you are doing now, UNA Sweden, we have young leaders who share their ideas directly here. That's what we really need in Georgia as well. And as I remember, when we involved to this conference and the workshop, thanks to UNA Sweden, when Georgian youth were able to join the discussions, they were super excited to have this opportunity to share their ideas with their peers across so many countries. So what we really need is to step back, maybe ourselves, and give the floor to them to keep the planet alive. Simply.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much. And Inessa, do you face any challenges in activated youth when it comes to the environment and climate issues in Armenia?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I will be short, just mentioning with points the main challenges that we face. So agreeing with Tamta that we need platforms, this non-formal. Besides this non-formal, the main challenge for us is that we don't have these topics in our educational system included. So we think that it's important also to have this formal educational platform also, that for example, the education about climate is included in the syllabuses of the school and universities programs. The second one is, I will agree with Emma, that it's connected with the political will. So the governments, we need to work, and not only we, for sure, not only civil society, but we need to work more with governments on the local, regional and national levels to educate them as well so they will start to practice what they preach. And the other is the challenge for us in Armenia is that we don't have many NGOs operating in the field, so there are several. So yes, another thing is lack of NGOs operating.
Yeah, and more platform for engagement.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing the Armenian perspective. Over to you, Goodluck. How does the situation look in Tanzania when it comes to the voices of young people? Are they listened to?
Thank you for the question. So the voices of young people are heard in Tanzania, and UNA Tanzania is among civil society organizations which provide for a space or platform where these young people can give out their recommendations on several issues. So, as I said before, in 2020 and 2021, we organized several consultations just to see how much of youth environmental issues can be taken on board through the 5-year development plan 3, which is a blueprint of the Tanzania national plan. So that is how we at least try to see that their voices are heard. But of course, still there are several challenges that youth are facing. Like sometimes it's just on capacity level, but sometimes it's just they think that since they don't see visibly like the impact of environmental destruction, then they feel like it's just normal. But if, for example, it was just vividly seen, that can make them at least taking much initiatives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where the importance of awareness raising also among youth comes in, which you're working a lot with.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Real short, Stockholm plus 50 is around the corner, and we all have the world's eyes on us right now. What do you, as youth members, want to say to them, Yoko and Emma? Like a last call to action.
Well, I feel like the only thing that I have to say is that act.
Yes. Shortly put, but very effective. Act. Yes.
So I'm also following, like, act. Like, it's always important to have really the youth engagement to act. But then at the same time, it's really important to also focus on the local level, because when we focus on the UN level, they're often missing the local level. So I think it's also important to act at local level, a grassroots movement, so that it's more concentrated at local level, and then move towards the larger level. Yes.
Thank you for that, and thank you to all the panelists for sharing your important insights and thoughts with us today. And thank you so much to everyone for listening. All right.
So we have gift for you.
Thank you so
We have the famous olive oil.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
thank you so much.
Thank you. And
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Ska du ta med den här?
Thank you. So much for coming. Thank you. And the last one. Thank you so much. Thank you. So, now we're going to move on to something completely different. We will welcome Mr. Oskar Molander. He is a Goodwill ambassador for UN Sweden, and he is also one of 2 young youth delegates to the UN General Assembly. He has recently finished his studies in political science and economics, but he has since many years also spent a lot of time on the art of dancing. Oskar is part of the group Creator Society within Human Rights Watch, and he will perform together with his 2 fellow dancers, Mr. Robin Pang and Mr. Martin Wallin, and the number that is to come is called Progress.
Tror jag är förlorad. Livet tog min vän, vi sa knappt farväl. Trodde vi var för coola. Säg mig bror, hur ska jag andas när de sjunger halleluja? Men ingen stannar upp om det ramlar. Vi springer allihopa under samma himmel och samma träd. När morgondagen gryr och butikerna har stängt, ser jag folk men ingen lev, för ingen vet att jag har byggt en rymdraket. Vill vara som fåglarna i skyn, flyga 100 000 mil. Hur vinnarna än vänder sen, hittar vi alltid hem igen. Hur vinnarna än vänder sen, hittar vi alltid hem igen. Vi hittar nog hem igen. Nu ekar den för alltid bland höghusen. Det är du och jag mot Goliat. Gården ligger tyst men jag hör dig igen. Sjunga bror, ja. Tänker leva nu för vi dör ju sen. Önskar du hade fortsatt. Men jag tror ändå inget är över än. När morgondagen gryr och fabrikerna har stängt, ser jag folk men ingen lev, för ingen vet att jag har byggt en rymdraket. Vill vara som Stålmannen i skyn, flyga 100 000 mil. Hur vinnarna än vänder sen hittar vi alltid hem igen. Om jag hade stått vid stupet som du hoppar ut för, bror, skulle hålla din hand om det åskar ute. Det berättade med tiden men jag glömmer inte. Utan mörka minnen kan man inte se om glöden brinner. Du såg hela bilden när du flög med vinden. Jag minns ögonblicket som du visade min ögonbryn. Höll på döda var kala plan. En helt vanlig lördag var bara ett barn som höll på spola framtiden. Låt mig spola framtiden. Hittar vi allt igen igen. Vi hittar nog hem i väg. Vi hittar nog hem i väg.
Thank you so much to Oscar, Robin, and Martin. And of course, we have some oils to you as well. So something. Thank you so much. Give me your hand, young man. Sorry. No worries. Thank you. There you go. And Oscar as well. There you go. Thank you so much. I would like to take the opportunity just to ask you, Oscar, since you're one of the 2 youth delegates to the UN General Assembly, I know that you're kind of breathing hardly now, so I don't know if you can talk, but if you can give it a try at least. Could you tell us a little bit about this? Just short. Yes, about. I have a mic for you, by the way, so that you all can hear us about your assignment.
Yeah, so I'm a bit catching my breath, but it was fun. Yeah, no, so I'm one of the Swedish UN delegates. I don't do much of dancing when I do that stuff, but it's all about raising awareness of Swedish youth and the topics of Swedish youth. And yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much that's it.
Sorry.
No worries at all. We're looking forward to hear more about that later on then, and we will invite you to some forum there, and then we can take into account what you have experienced and so on. So that would be great. So thank you again for coming here today. So a big applause. Our next session before the coffee break is about environmental defenders and the struggle for the right to a healthy environment. So we will have the pleasure to present a discussion about environmental defenders and the struggle then for a healthy environment. The panel that we're going to listen to is arranged by some of our fellow civil society partners. And the UN Resolution 4813 on the right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment was adopted in October 2021, and it recognizes the right to a healthy environment as a fundamental human right. This is an important achievement for civil society, which will support the continued struggle to protect the environment and to redress the burden of environmental damage of vulnerable groups. The panelists will join us online, and they will discuss what actions are necessary to make this new right an effective tool for human rights and environmental defenders, as they unfortunately face escalating threats and violent attacks in many countries all over the globe. The session will highlight the vital role of environmental defenders, and it will be moderated by Ms. Karin Lexén, who is Secretary General of Naturskyddsföreningen, the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation, And she will also present the panelists. Is she here or is she? Where is she? Here, there you are. Welcome. A big applause. So, Karin, a warm welcome to you, and
thank you very much. Yours. And thank you for welcoming me here. I'm going to present to you 2 panelists by me here in real life, and then we have 1 panelist online. And so the first panelist is Ivan Enril, who is representing IBON International in the Philippines. Please come forward so that we can see you. And we also have here in Stockholm, December Nodolo, who is for the Environmental Monitoring Group in South Africa. Please join us as well. And then, via link, we have Daniel Ortiz Galeggio from Centro de Alternativas al Desarrollo in Colombia. Welcome. I'm glad to see that the technique is working. So this seminar is organized by a number of organizations. It's organized by Forum CIV, Business and Human Resource Center, Swedwatch, Afrikagrupperna, Latinamerikagrupperna, and Naturskyddsföreningen, the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation. And we know, all of us, that the situation for environmental defenders is very and extremely worrying, and it's increasingly so. In 2020, Global Witness reported that 227 environmental defenders were killed, and this is really just the tip of the iceberg. The threats and the violations on environmental defenders is huge, and unfortunately, during the COVID pandemic, it has increased. So this seminar aims to highlight the necessary actions and instruments that are needed in order to achieve a better situation, to protect the environment, and to respect the human rights on the environment. So according to Human Rights Council, the triple planetary threats, climate change, loss of biodiversity, and pollution, is the single greatest human rights challenge of our time. An estimated 1 in 6 premature deaths are caused by pollution, and tens of millions of people are displaced each year because of climate change. Biodiversity loss risks to lead to collapse of entire ecosystems. Thousands of individuals, groups, and civil society organizations have called upon political leaders, the private sector, and the public to take bold action on this. We must protect the planet and its inhabitants. The right to a healthy environment builds on the discussions following the 1972 Stockholm Declaration on the need for transformative changes to protect nature and human well-being. And the UN resolution just mentioned on the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment recognizes the right to a healthy environment as a human right and acknowledges the damage inflicted by climate change and environmental destructions on millions of people across the world. It emphasizes that the most vulnerable people are more directly and more acutely impacted. So, the adoption of the resolution is an important step in the right direction. However, there is now a need for member states to move from recognition of the right on paper to implementing policies and instruments that can truly protect the planet and its people. For years, environmental defenders, as our friends here, have fighted against the causes and impacts of environmental breakdown. They have challenged irresponsible business who destroy forests, wetlands, oceans, and biodiversity hotspots. However, as I just said, during the last years, we have witnessed an escalating trend of threats and violence on environmental defenders who peacefully try to protect their homes, their livelihoods, and their nature from harmful impacts of industries like oil and gas, mining, and agribusiness. So we will now discuss the situation for environmental defenders, and we will also talk about what actions and instruments are needed to hold states and business accountable for environmental harm and human rights violations. So we will begin by listening to Ivan Enril from IBAN International at the Philippines. You will talk about the situation for environmental defenders in the Philippines and especially focusing on indigenous people.
Okay, right, correct. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ivan Enrile. I am from the Philippines, representing my organization, IBAN International. So, when we talk about the situation of environmental and land defenders in the Philippines, we cannot separate it from the current deteriorating human rights situation in the Philippines, where since the reign of the current president, Rodrigo Duterte, around 427 activists, human rights defenders, land defenders have been killed. 195 of those are of that number, 427 activists are land and environmental defenders. So what are some of our observations or trends with the attacks being done against environmental and land defenders? Our observation is that increasing numbers of indigenous peoples are being targeted for massacres. So in 2025, out of 7 mass killings were perpetrated against indigenous peoples, and the most shocking case actually happened just about the turn of the year in 2021 when 9 Tumandok indigenous peoples were killed by the concerted efforts of the police and the military, and these indigenous peoples were part of the groups opposing the development of a mega dam in their area that would have seen their lands or their homes being displaced and their resources being destroyed with the construction of this dam. And also, according to some analysis of environmental rights groups, attacks against environmental and land defenders happen, especially when the government is pushing for when the government is pushing a particular revitalization of mining policies or laws. And this happened during 2012, 2016, 2017, and 2019. The killings also follow the contours of where areas that are rich in natural resources and that are open spaces for infrastructure development. So, the attacks against environmental defenders happen where there is a rich potential for business to come in. Drivers of attacks can also be linked to extractive projects. Mining in mining operations represent 43% of environmental defenders killed. Plantation and agribusiness represent 39%. Logging 13%. And what is at stake here is that defenders killed through the years represented vast tracts of ecological areas and ecological critical areas that they represent. And together, the value of ecosystems that our environmental defenders have defended, we pegged it at around 1.3 trillion Philippine pesos per year, or it's about billions of US dollars if you translate it, of ecosystem values in terms of their carbon sequestration, water regulation, production of non-timber forest resources, agriculture and health services, and disaster resilience. So that's the trend that we are seeing, and we also anticipate that the attacks against environmental and land defenders will continue to increase, especially with the incoming government that we will be having. It's as you all know, or some of you may know, the Marcoses have returned to power.
Yeah.
So,
And that is not good news.
that is not good news for environmental and land defenders. And I take this opportunity to appeal to civil society for solidarity for environmental and land defenders in the Philippines.
Thank you very much for a very worrisome message. But you have us here. You are here in Stockholm. We are soon entering into the Stockholm Plus 50 conference. What would be the main message from you to us in order to help out? It's a really difficult situation,
Right.
I know. So
It's a difficult situation. I think we're talking about these new instruments that we could harness to hold business and governments to account. But at the same time, I think we also, when we are confronted with governments like Duterte, who doesn't care about these international norms and instruments, who have openly derided the International Criminal Court, I think the important thing that we can do is to, again, solidarity for people's movements on the ground that are confronting these challenges. We need to provide them the support. We need to provide them the platforms for them to be able to voice out the situation that they are facing and the struggles that they are doing for their communities and peoples.
So keep on informing about the situation, keep on pushing for the sort of understanding from the international community of the severity of the situation, and also holding private business accountable for what they are doing in the Philippines might be a few things we can try to push for. So thank you for now. And we're moving to the next continent, from Asia and Philippines to Africa. We're moving to South Africa and the Environmental Monitoring Group. And your name, I love your name, is December Tuluvu, and we realized we were born in the same month, you and I. Maybe I should pick that name myself. But anyway, please tell us about the situation where you come from for the actors who are defending environmental protection.
Thank you very much. My name is December Ndlovu. I come from South Africa, in the province called Mpumalanga. I think that is the most beautiful province in that country. Yeah, I think when we talk about the environmental activism, in the last 10 years, it has been very, 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 very difficult. And it's actually a hostile situation and has become very, very dangerous in South Africa. Because when government and companies want to do whatever they want to do in the name of development, if it's a mining, they simply go to the traditional council for people like us that we stay in the rural areas. We are not even a consultant. And I think it's worse even now, because ever since in the last couple of years, they formed the traditional council. It was formed by the traditional leaders. So now those council, they represent the whole community. So if developers or a government want to plant maybe plantations or mining or whatever destructive initiative it is, they will simply go to the traditional leader, talk to him, and then he will call the council. Once the council agreed, it's assumed that everybody agreed to that. So that is very problematic, because it limits the space for people to have input on what is about the impact of such development. And in South Africa, we all know for sure that there is problem of unemployment. So I think the government and the companies, they exploit those weaknesses by promising people jobs. Like if you come and do your mining, we're going to hire so many thousands of people, and we are going to be hiring and giving bursaries to the youth. So, but not telling them the truth about the impact of those specific development as to what will be the problem to that. So now, environmental activists, when you come and talk against that development, you literally become an enemy of the people, because they feel like you actually are stopping the employment that should be brought by that specific mining or that specific plantations that will be planted in that particular area. So I think that is very problematic, because when you talk to people that need a job, people that are hungry, they simply want and agree to what you promise them, as much as it's not really doable, but most of the time that is how it end up happening. I think in South Africa there are many activists that has been killed because of defending their ancestral land, and most of us we are victimized for being outspoken about things that government and other companies wants to do. In my province, in Mpumalanga, we've got more than 4,000 hectares that is planted by these eucalyptus gum trees. We know for a fact that they use so much water, and they destroy the wetlands, which are very important for people like traditional health practitioners, and the grassland, which is also a very important source of medicinal plant for people like traditional health practitioners and other spiritual healers. So just to give you an example, in one meeting that is hosted by, it's called the Catchment Management Forums meeting, which is hosted by government parastatal. Whenever I stood up and raised the impact of large-scale industrial timber plantations on the water downstream flow and on the grassland, I was told several times in my face to say, you should stop asking that question, because there is no way we are going to help you with that, and there is no way we are going to chop down those plantations, because the furniture that you're sitting on, it's right from those plantations. Whereas we know the truth that it's not the truth. Most of that products it actually exported to well-developed countries where they don't allow those activities to take place. And
so
another
I think
example,
you need to round up, but please finish off.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah. Just lastly, there is a friend, an activist, environmental friend that was based in Sekhukhune. Sekhukhune is one of the mining-infested area in South Africa. So 4 years to 5 years back, he stood up against the social, actually he demanded to see the labor, the social labor plans, so that they could know exactly what should the community benefit out of the minings. That guy was poisoned, and eventually he left environmental activism. So I think that's a very difficult platform in our days to be in those.
And that is not the only case of being poisoned, I know, from having visited your friends in South Africa too. So I think you have representatives of your government here in Stockholm coming in. So what would you like us to say to them?
I think South African government is one of the government that has been very, 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 very clever to address or to actually to hide its real problems, because South African constitution is so good to the level that you will never think that the South Africans would have a problem. But the problem, the reality, it's different. So it's good on paper, but there is no implementation of all those it's promised. So I think it will be good if you can tell them to say, there are people that, people from your country, they told us that all these good wedding that you put before us that are so friendly, to human lives, you don't put them into practice back in your country.
Okay, thank you. And to bear witness on what is happening on the ground, I think is really important. To let them know that we have friends that tells us the truth is also important, I guess. Now, thank you. I think both of you, there's so much you could tell us, so I'm really sorry that I have to keep you short. But we also have to turn to the next continent and to Latin America and Colombia, another country that we know have severe political problems. So Daniel Ortiz Galleso, please tell us about the situation in Colombia and the case of the environmental defenders there.
Well, hello to everyone. Thanks, Karin, for the question and the invitation. I'm representing CEALDES, so we send like a Bogota from Colombia and all the different regions in our country. So basically in CEALDES, we work with grassroots movements and we have like an approach of analyzing and transforming socio-environmental conflicts from a participatory action research perspective with local communities, peasants, indigenous people, Afro-Colombian people that are the main environmental and land defenders in Colombia. So I would like to share like some ideas and well, about the context of what is happening with environmental and land defenders in our country. First of all, it's like in 2016 was signed like the peace agreement with Colombia. This was like a moment of hope for all of us, and we had like this hope to do like this structural and structural transformations and reform regarding social environmental conflicts, distribution of land, and the comprehensive agrarian reform. So it's supposed that this moment was to be like the moment for environmental and land defenders to make like concrete social changes. The point and what is concerning is that despite of the government has said, the government of President Ivan Duque has said that well, the implementation of the peace agreement is going well. That's not true, and this has been said like in different in international stages, even with United Nations, right? So, but that's not true, and we can see is like that we were expecting, for example, like the protection of our environmental defenders, but what we have found is that since the implementation of the peace agreement in 2016, more than 600 environmental and land defenders has been murdered, and mainly indigenous and peasants leaders. This is very, very concerning. And for example, in 2019, we had like this infamous place, the famous first place among the countries with more environmental leaders murdered. We had like more than 212. Yeah, so the situation is very concerning. And these murders and these intimidations and this stigmatization of environmental and land defenders have both like conjunctural and structural reasons. Like the structural reasons has to do with the model of development. In CEALDES, we're very critical of our model of development. That is a machine that produces inequalities, profit for a few, destruction of the environment, and exploitation of labor for the majority of people. So there is a problem in terms, and a structural problem with the model of development. And some conjunctural reasons has to do with the reconfigurations of the armed actors in the territory because of the peace agreement with FARC. And other points has to do with the lack of the implementation of the peace agreement. We are very emphatic in this. This is very important, and we need the international support for the implementation. So I also would like to know, like the main problems that we have in terms of the advocacy of the environment is like we need to protect first the rights, the human rights of our environmental defenders and readers and leaders in order for them to protect our rights to the environment. So, and this is a whole conception in terms of the international law and the human rights framework that is like the relationship and interdependence of different human rights. So we have to take care of our leaders first. And also, well, there is like some problems regarding lack of access to information, problems with justice and impunity. So as there is an impunity in some cases, criminal bands, even entrepreneurs, and core politicians think that they can threat our environmental leaders with impunity. So this is very important. And also one thing that I would like to say is like there are like some cases in which like the protection of the environment with an ocean, for example, of militarization that is happening in Colombia can also threat our environmental and land defender leaders. So there is one military operation that is happening right now in Colombia, more than 4 years, that is called the military operation of Artemisa. This is a military campaign with a vision of conservation that try, to put all the people that are in national parks that they have been living there for decades out of their land. And this is under like this guise and this force of environmental protections. But there is a lot of stigmatization happening, also criminalization and displacement. And what is very concerning that suppose there is like international cooperation funding involved, that it may be the case we have that insight from Ciudades that is funding this approach to conservation that is really threatening the human rights of our environmental leaders and defenders.
Thank you very much. So I think I hear from you, and I also heard from our first speaker that women and indigenous people are maybe the worst off, even though it's a severe situation for all environmental defenders and also in South Africa. And I also hear you saying that implementation is the real thing, and to really listen to what is happening on the ground, and not only to the fancy speakers of your government when they are coming visiting Stockholm, for instance. I need some help with the time because I'm a poor moderator who don't have a watch. How much time do I? 1 minute left. Okay, I could feel it. So I guess we don't have so much time right now to discuss more, but I think you've really been very good at giving us your pictures and painting a very worrisome painting of the situation of environmental defenders. And it's clear that implementation is still lacking, and that we need to really listening to carefully to what is happening on the ground, and you need international support in order to respect and protect the environmental defenders in your countries. Finally, I'd really like to thank all 3 of you, not only for participating in this seminar, but also for all the work you're doing. It's so amazing what you're doing, and thanks to all of you, and also give it to your communities. It's really important what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much all. If you could just please stay half a minute and you will get the olive oil. Thank you so much, Karin. And I couldn't put the words much better than you did, that you're doing such important work in your countries, and the situation is really, really severe. and so much is needed. And we're very grateful that you came here today to inform us and to raise this issue to a broader audience. So thank you very much for that. So we'll see. A warm applause again, and I'll give them the Orivolo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.